Daf Nun Amud Beis, 4 lines from the top. Gufa Boy Rabbi Elazar L'divrei Omer Par Yom Kippurim Korban Yochid, according to the Man Domer, who says that the par of the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur, we treat it like a Korban Yochid. He brings the par; it's his par, and therefore we treat it like a Korban Yochid. Meaning, even though it's a Kippur Dovid basic, but nevertheless it's considered a Korban Yochid. The shayla is Oisa Tmura or Ein Oisa Tmura. Does it make a Tmura or not? The Torah says that if a person attempts to substitute a Korban for another animal, that an animal that has a kedusha of a korban, and he wants to substitute it for another animal, the Torah says, "Vayahu Tmurasiya Kaddish." They're both Kaddish. That the substitute is Kaddish, but the original one retains its kedusha. Now, this din of Tmura only applies by a korban yachid. It doesn't apply by a korban sibor, nor by a korban shutfim. So his shayla is, if you consider the par Yom Kippurim a korban yachid, does it make a Tmura or not? Frank the Gemara, my kami boy, what's the shayla? What's the shayla over here? Why is he asking the shayla over here? We know that a korban yachid makes a Tmura. A korban tzibor, korban shutfim, doesn't make tmura. So the Gemara says no. Perhaps the shayla is as follows: I basar makdish as linan, I basar miskaper as linan. How do we view this? Do we view it as from the perspective of the makdish? So the one who's makdish it, the one who consecrates it, it comes from the kohen gadol, so it's his. So therefore, we would consider it to be a korban yochid, and therefore it should make tmura, because it's, if we view it from his perspective, it's a korban yochid. So like any other korban yochid, it would make a tmura. Or ibosam is kapra as linan, even though the kohen gadol, he is the one that's makdish. He brings the korban, but it's on behalf of his household and on behalf of all of the other kohanim. So if we look at and view it from the perspective of the ones receiving the kapara, then it would be considered to be a korban shutim, and there's no tmura. So that's the shayla. Do we view it from the perspective of the makdish and there is tmura because it's a korban yochid, or from the perspective of the miskaper, which means it's a korban shutfim and there's no tmura? Well, frankly, Gemara, why is that a shayla? Pshita the basar miskaper aslina. It's poshut that you have to view it from the perspective of the miskaper, because we know Dama Rabbi Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan a makdish meisiv chaimish. A person who is makdish an animal. His person is makdish an animal on behalf of his friend. So, for instance, Reuven has a chiyuv of a korban, and Shimon is makdish an animal on behalf of Reuven. So, therefore, we say hamakdish meisiv chaimish. The din is that if somebody redeems the animal, if it has a mum and it's you want to redeem it, if it is the owner who's redeeming it, he has to add on a fifth. He has to add on a fifth to the value of his redeeming it. That's only the bailam. Now, over here, who's the bailam over here? Is it the one who has the obligation of the korban, Reuven, or is it the Shimon that is makdish on his behalf? So Rabbi Yochanan says, "Hamakdish meisiv chaimish." The makdish is considered to be the owner. The makdish is considered the bailam, and he has to add on a fifth. Secondly, he said, "V'hamiskaper oisa bo tmura." As far as the din of tmura is concerned, so who can make the tmura? The owner can make a tmura. Someone who's not an owner cannot make a tmura, cannot substitute. It doesn't have the effect of being makdish, the substitute animal, with kedusha. The owner, if he makes a tmura, he tries to substitute, then v'hayahu tmurasiya kaddish. They're both kaddish, but it's only the owner, not somebody else. So in this scenario over here, who is considered to be the owner? It's hamiskaper. The miskaper, he said tmura. So you see clearly over here that we judge it that from the perspective of the miskaper. So here also, what's the shayla? We should judge it from the perspective of the miskaper, and therefore it should be considered a korban of shutfim, and there should be no tmura. Now the third din he said was that right? If a person separates truma on behalf of his friend, so Reuven has truma, he has produce, and the Shimon he separates truma on behalf of Reuven. So he takes from his own produce to pater the obligation of Ruvain for giving truma. So Shimon, the one who is the one that he was the one that was mafresh, he was the one that was tyrim, he's the one that he separated and gave of the produce for truma. He has the right to designate who he wants to give this truma to. He could give it to any kohen that he wants. He has the right of Taivas Hano, that benefit, to designate who the kohen should receive, which kohen should receive this truma. That right is his. So, Barak Kolpana, we see over here that Hamiskaper is about more. So what is the shayla over here? Someone explains, yes, it's true. We know that it's Pasha, it was Pasha to Rabbi Lazar, that Basam Miskaper Aslina. And as far as the Tmura goes, we look as far as the recipients. So therefore, on one hand, you should say it's clear cut that there is no din tomorrow over here, because if we go Basam Miskaper, it's Shutvim, it's not a Yochid, it's not a private person. However, this is the shayla that he has. We know that the kapara is not only for the Kohen Gadol, it's for other Kohanim as well. But the shayla is, Echav HaKohanim, the other Kohanim, B'kviyusa Miskapre, do they receive the kapara as part of a kviyas, something that's established, part and parcel of the korban, meaning, even though the Kohen Gadol is makdish it, but after he's makdish it, the other Kohanim are considered to be full-fledged partners over here, the shutfim, and if that's the case, there's no Tmura. Do we say that? Do we view it in that way? Or do we say no, they're not partners, they're not full-fledged partners. Really, it's considered to be the korban of the Kohen Gadol. It's really his. However, they receive a kapara through his korban. They're not considered to be the partners. Maybe it's bekufiyim is part. It's literally mean floating. It's floating on top. It's secondary. They're not partners. It's ancillary. They're not partners. But through his korban, they receive, so to speak, on top of it. They receive, floating on top of it, they receive a kapara through his korban. And if that's the case, it is considered to be a korban yachid, and there would be a temura. That's the shayla. Tosfos points out that if we say this, therefore we would say that not only that the other Kohanim are not considered to be full-fledged partners, we would have to say, therefore, even Beisai, even the Kohen Gadol's household, are not considered to be full-fledged partners. It's only Bekufim Eskapri, because if they were partners, it would still be considered a Korban Shutim, and there would be no Temura. So therefore, on the tzad that we say Bekufim Eskapri, it means everybody, except for the Kohen Gadol himself, is Bekufim Miskapra, and it's only considered to be the korban of the Kohen Gadol. So that's the shayla. So now, Shmuel, let's bring a raya from the following. There's a chumrah that a korban has, a regular and ordinary korban has over a tmura. And there's a chumrah that the tmura has more than a zevach. There's a chumrah of the zevach. What's a chumrah? A korban can be brought, a korban tzibur, a korban yachid. A tmura, as we mentioned, can only be through a yachid. A tzibur cannot make a tmura, nor shutim. So therefore, chaymer b'zavach, because it applies by tzibur as well. Secondly, v'doichas Shabbos v'satuma. It can also be doichas Shabbos v'tuma. Now, a tmura, you cannot, even if a korban where we are makriv the tmura, but it's not zmana kavua, it's not a specific time, so it's not doicha Shabbos or tuma. Mashen king by a zevach, if it's zmana kavua, if it has to be brought at a specific time, it is doicha Shabbos and tuma. V'oisa tmura, and a korban, a tmura can be made on it. If a person makes an exchange for a korban, then the din is that the tmura, the exchange, the substitute, has a din of a tmura and has kedusha. Masha ein came b'tmura, but that's not the case of a tmura. That a tmura does not make a tmura. Only a korban makes a tmura, but a tmura does not make a tmura. So that's the chumrah of the zevach. And chaymer b'tmura b'zevach, but the tmura has a chumrah over the zevach. What's that? Shah tmura chal al balmum kavua. That a tmura can be chalal balmum kavua, and therefore it retains the kedusha, and it does not become completely chulin, and therefore the animal cannot be sheared you cannot shear the wool, or you cannot work with it. Now, an animal that has a kedushas aguf. So if a person is makdish an animal, and he has kedushas aguf, it has a mum, you can be pointed. You're pointed, then it's yoitze ligozes. It's yoitze rather lechulin, but it's also ligozes v'lavan. It goes lechulin, and it can be eaten, etc. But it cannot be worked. You cannot shear the wool. It still retains a vestige of the kedusha. Something that has kedushas domim, there is no restriction. So an animal that had a mum, and if a person is makdish it, a person is makdish a bal mum, it never had kedushas aguf. It only has kedushas domim, and therefore, when you redeem it, you can redeem it and you can work with it. So a zevach is not chal on a bal mum. A tmura shatmura chal a bal mum kavua. Now, if a person there was a korban, and a person wanted to make a substitute, and he took an animal that had a mum kavua, permanent blemish. So now, even though you can't make this as a korban to give it kedushas aguf, but if you made a tmura on it, it has that kedushas aguf. Of course, you cannot be makriv that. However, it has kedushas aguf, and it retains the vestige of kedusha even when you redeem it, and you cannot shear it or work with it. So a tmura chalabal mukavua v'eni yotzei lechulin goes of love, but mashen can be zevach. But a zevach is not so. A zevach, that's not the case. If a person was makdish a bal mum for a korban, then it never had kedushas aguf, and you can redeem it ligos of love. So, hi zevach hechidomi. What is the case of the zevach that we're talking about? If we're talking about it's a korban yochid, now the Reisha said that the zevach is noig b'tzibur kivi yochid, and it's deicha Shabbos and deicha tum. So what are we talking about over here? So if we're talking about a yochid, if we're talking about a zevach of a yochid, that it belongs to a private person, midach Shabbos v'tumah, it's not deicha Shabbos v'tumah. So what does it mean that the chaymer of the zevach is deicha? A korban yochid, not a regular and ordinary korban yochid, it's not zman kavua. It doesn't have to come at a specific time. So therefore, it's not deicha Shabbos v'tumah. So if you're talking about the yochid, it's a deicha Shabbos v'tumah. Ella the tzibur, elamai, you're going to tell me that it's a tzibur miyasa t'mura. A korban tzibur does not make t'mura. So it says that the chomer b'zevach, that it's noyeg b'tzibur kivi yochid, it's noyeg b'tzibur like b'yochid, v'deich ze Shabbos v'zetuma v'isa t'mura. Well, a korban tzibur is not deich t'mura. So what are we referring to? What are we talking about over here? Ella must be a love the par. It must be that we're talking about the par of the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur. That is considered to be, in such a case, it has, since it's mana kavua, v'deich ze Shabbos v'zetuma. It's deich Shabbos and Tuma because it's a specific time and it must come on Yom Kippur. The kvil is man, it has man kavua, v'oisa t'mura. Now the Rice says that it's oisa t'mura. Why is that? The korban yachid who must be because it's a korban yachid. We see that you treat it as a korban yachid and zeichatuma. So isn't this a raya that we must be referring to this case over here where it's deicha Shabbos? We're talking about a korban that's deicha Shabbos, zeichatuma, and that it is also a tmura. Well, what is the case? They seem to be contradictory. A korban that is deicha Shabbos and tuma has to be zman kavua, and normally a korban yachid is not. And on the other hand, to make a tmura, oysa tmura has to be davka korban yachid. So are we not talking about the par of the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur, which is zman kavua, and therefore, and it is a korban yachid? We treat it as a korban yachid and it's oysa tmura. Where it says no, Omar Rashesh, it's not talking about the par. Loi be'ela shel Aaron. It's talking about the aisle. It's not talking about the par. It's talking about the aisle the Kohen Gadol brings on Yom Kippur. Now, in this case over here, the aisle is not, the other Kohanim do not receive a kapara with this aisle. So therefore, it's not considered a korban of shutvim. It's truly a korban yachid, but it's a korban yachid, which is mana kavua. And that's why it's deicha Shabbos and Tuma, and it's oisa t'mura. So that's what we're talking about over here. It's the aisle, which is the oila, and it's only the Kohen Gadol that has the kapara through it, and it's the other Kohanim do not have the kapara with this. They have the kapara with the chatas, but not with ayot and oila.